Welcome students to this screencast on Introduction to Summary Statistics. This is a follow-up to our last activity where we did the Instant Challenge Fling Machine. And during that challenge, I asked you guys to collect 10 data points of your Fling tests. So that's the data we're going to use today to answer number 1 here in our conclusion. So what this asks us to do is to analyze the cotton ball travel distance data. You were to record the data of 10 different trials. The first thing we're going to try to do is to create what's called a dot plot, sometimes called a line plot. Then we're going to create a histogram of our data using what we're going to call class intervals. I'm going to skip over C right now. We're going to talk about normal distribution a little bit later. We have another lesson on statistics before we can get to that. But if you followed the video that we watched, or if you haven't watched the video that precedes this, it is going to be above the link to this screencast, so please watch it first, where that video will introduce us to what exactly we mean here by mean, median, and range. And we're going to, again, save standard deviation for later. Okay, so the video that we will have watched is going to be Crash Course, Mean, Median, and Mode, Measures of Central Tendency. So if you're watching this screencast later, please view this video. And what we're going to try to do today, I will have introduced you to the formulas for this, but we're going to use some more modern tools to process this data, particularly Excel. Outside of Microsoft Word, Excel is by far the most used productivity software in the working world. So this is something that almost all of you will have to be familiar with on some level, if you're not already. You may be familiar with Google Sheets, which does some of this capability, but not nearly as much as Excel. And what we have here are some of what we wanted to answer in this question. We have our raw data points listed here. This is what was referred to as a histogram, which shows us how many data points are within these ranges on the bottom. This is our dot plot, which basically shows us each individual value of each trial. And then here's some of our, what we refer to as summary statistics. The mean, median, mode, and the question asks us for the range. So to find our range, which is basically the total distance between our minimum and maximum data points, we're going to calculate the minimum, the maximum, and then use those data points to find the range. So I'm going to show you how to create this spreadsheet here, and that's what this type of software is called in general, is a spreadsheet. So I'm going to just copy these data points to get me started. You'll have to enter them manually. So I'm going to open a new file here. So you'll be starting with a blank spreadsheet file like this. And the first thing you want to do is create a title. I'm going to call mine raw data. Kind of generic, but you can call it what it was. Fling machine distance. And then I'm going to paste in my data points here. Oop, I didn't grab them. Back. Okay, now you will have gone and entered each one of these data points manually. Okay, now what we're going to do to create our histogram chart is I'm going to click and hold the mouse button down and select all of my data. I'm then going to go to Insert. I'm going to choose, there's a selection of charts here. I'm going to choose this one, which it says Insert Statistics Chart, and I'm going to choose a basic histogram. Okay. So what this chart tells me is, if we look down here at the bottom, it says 18 and comma 39. So this tells me how many data points are in between 18 and 39. Okay, so this can tell me, relatively how many sort of short shots I had. Um, this this bar here tells me that I had 6 data points that were between 39 and 60. So I had a lot of, what we might call average range or middle range shots. And then here, this tells me how many um, shots I had, which looks like maybe just one that was in between 60 and 81. So this bar I might look at to tell me, relatively how many shots I have that are really far. So, I can look at this and already make some, some inferences from it that, you know, most of my shots are probably going to be here in between 35 and 60. I won't have a lot of shots that go super far. And maybe some, but less shots that go a short distance. Okay. So it's a really quick way just to get just a feel for your data, histograms. Okay. Now we're going to I'm going to click over here because here's where I want to make another chart. Looking back at the assignment, it asks us to make, well, we just did section B here, making a histogram. And those intervals at the bottom are what we call class intervals. Okay, you should read through these instructions and hover your mouse or click on each of these highlighted words to make sure you understand the definitions of them. Part A asks us to make a dot plot. So we're going to come back here and make the dot plot. Okay. So I clicked in a box where I want my dot plot to begin. I'm going to come back to my data and highlight all the data so it knows what it's going to make a chart out of. I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to choose this type of chart down here below the histogram. This is sometimes it's called a scatter plot. Project Leadaway is calling it a dot plot, and I can choose the one that looks like a bunch of dots. And what this is really telling me is just showing me visually every single one of my data points. If I look on the x-axis, this is data point 1, data point 2, 3, 4, and so forth, and we can see what those values are. Again, humans are very visual, and this is a much easier and quicker way to start to comprehend what your data is telling you than just looking at a list of numbers here. Okay, down here, coming back to my exemplar. Okay, we're going to do some calculations based on these formulas that we saw, but we're going to let Excel do the hard lifting for us here. We're going to calculate our mean, median, and mode, which are measures of central tendency, like we learned in our video. And then I'm going to find the minimum and the maximum values so I can determine my total range. Okay, and then we'll be done here. So to do this, I'm just going to put some some titles. Mean. I'm going to push the over arrow key. Median. Mode. I'll have my minimum value, my maximum value, and the range. Now, another cool trick in a spreadsheet is within each of these squares, which are formerly known as cells, you can do mathematics. You can type in a formula. Here I'm just typing in text, but I can type in a formula and do a calculation. Now I don't have to actually type in the whole formula for the mean. It's built in. So to use a built-in formula, and there are lots of them you can look up, we're going to come up here to this what's called the formula bar, and I'm going to type an equal sign. Plus an equal sign. That always begins a formula, and the formulas are usually all capital letters. Now another name for the mean is average. So the formula happens to be called average. And then I will select the left parentheses. And within those parentheses, I'm going to click on my first data point and drag to my last data point. And what you can see here is it actually labeled my first and last data point and put a little a colon in between. And that means to select all values between cell A2. Okay, here's A2. It's just like Battleship, and A11. Okay, it's going to select all those cells and it's going to apply the average formula, and boom, calculated my average or my mean. There's a similar formula for a median and an identical process. I'm going to type out median in all capitals, left parentheses. I'm going to click in box A2 and select all my data. Put my last parentheses, hit enter, and there's the median. Okay. Likewise, the mode. I keep doing plus. Mode in all capital. Click, select, drag all my data. Okay, and without doing all that heavy lifting, I was able to calculate the mean, median, and mode. Okay, or rather have Excel do it for me. Okay. Now there is a formula to look through a set of data and determine the minimum value. So do equals, capital MIN. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a minus sign in there. Equals MIN, parentheses, click, hold the mouse button and drag, select all my data, right parentheses. There's my minimum value it determined was 18. Equal, find the maximum value within this data range. And there's my max. Okay. Now the total range in data is just how many numbers are in between the smallest value and the biggest value. And I just calculated the smallest value, 18, and the biggest value, 62. So to calculate the range, instead of using a formula, I'm going to show you something else you can do. Is you can make your own formulas by selecting cells. So to calculate the range, I just want to subtract these two numbers. I want to take 62 and subtract 18. So I'm going to press equals, and I'll put a parentheses, and I'm going to click on the cell that has the number 62, and then I'm just going to press the minus button, and I'm going to click on the cell that has 18, and then put my right parenthesis, and it will just subtract whatever two numbers are in those squares or those cells. Hit enter, and there's my range. Total range of data is 44. Okay. So we really did a lot of data processing here. As we move forward, we'll learn to interpret this data more. But I also wanted to show you how to use Excel, which is the most used tool to do these kinds of things, and answer this question. So your task here is to reproduce this with your data and upload it to the submission link on Canvas.